because they transplant the eschaton of heaven and hell within the physical universe, within corporeality itself. Now, in turn, these myths have helped to fuel the Promethean fire of modern socio-political utopian ambitions. For instance, communist eschatology promised an earthly heaven in the form of a mythical workers' paradise. This earthly paradise was preceded by the apocalyptic dialectic of the bourgeoisie against the proletariat. And this was the Marxist counterpart to the biblical end times presented in the book of Revelation. And according to Marx's eschatology, this dialectical struggle was preceded by a fall, so to speak. However, unlike the biblical fall, which was caused by the anthropocentric hubris of Adam and Eve, who wanted to exalt themselves above God, the Marxian fall was the introduction of, alleged introduction of private property. They held that once private property was introduced, man who was inherently good suddenly became corrupted by greed, and that led to a fall from his utopian Eden. Now, communism sought to expunge the supposed evil of private property, thereby restoring man to his first estate and reconstituting a classless Eden. Of course, no theoretician, including Marx himself, could pinpoint the indeterminate stage during which the state would wither away and the proletariat could enjoy utopia without Big Brother consistently confiscating its wealth. Well, the truth is that communism enshrined a perpetual state with perpetual power, and herein is the expediency of the neo-Gnostic Marxist myth. The eschaton immanentized the secular Gnostics of the eschaton immanentized by the secular Gnostics of Marxism became a steel cage within which the worker was kept by the omnipotent state, and that's what made communism such an effective scientific dictatorship. And of course, communism would be pitted in a dialectical struggle with its ideological kissing cousin, fascism, which was also a scientific dictatorship. But Karl Marx himself qualified as a secular Gnostic. Marx basically relocated Hegel's dialectic, which was originally a spiritual concept, a very innocuous spiritual concept developed by George Friedrich Hegel. Marx relocated Hegel's dialectic within the ontological plane of the physical universe. Now, while Marx rejected Hegel's Weltgeist, that is, Hegel's concept of a world spirit, his relegation of the dialectic to corporeality resulted in the world spirit's transplantation within man himself. Now, given Hegel's conception of the Weltgeist as an emergent deity immanent to the physical cosmos, its transplantation within humanity may not have deviated too far from its original Hegelian context. After all, Hegel believed that the will of the Weltgeist could be rendered incarnate in so-called heroes, or great men who appeared to facilitate mankind's dialectical evolution. But this was a derivative of the messianic legends of older occult religions, which inverted the messianic motifs of the traditional Abrahamic faiths. Within the occult context, God incarnate was actually man made a God without God, not God made incarnate within man. And this was one of the inner Areopagites of Adam Weishaupt, who, of course, was the founder of the infamous Illuminati. And this doctrine of man made a God without man, man made a God without God, is what's known as Luciferianism. And essentially, Luciferianism is a religion that's veiled in secularism, which constitutes the dominant cultural milieu of the 20th and 21st century. And the rise of this new religio-political order was facilitated by the promulgation of scientific materialism. And I basically submit to you and your listeners that the promulgation of scientific materialism was designed to perpetuate a politically and socially and ideologically expedient metaphysical paradigm And this paradigm, again, emptied the traditional Abrahamic faiths of their metaphysical contents and transplanted them here within the ontological plane of the physical universe. Now, with the heavens eviscerated, the metaphysical concepts that were traditionally considered supersensible and transcendent became corporeal. Again, for instance, the eschaton of heaven and hell was relocated within the temporal spatial cosmos, and more significantly, God was transplanted within man himself. Thus, we have a secular religion, and this religion was secular humanism, also known to more esoteric thinkers and the higher degrees of esoteric occult secret societies as Luciferianism. Secular humanism was actually Luciferianism disseminated on the popular level under another appellation, and it is the edifying religion of every modern scientific dictatorship, be it fascism or communism. And its religious zealots were socio-political utopians. And of course, socio-political utopianism has been promulgated under several banners. Communism, fascism. Nowadays, it's taken on some very odd, mutated forms, such as neoconservatism, which is both neo-Trotskyist thought with some fascist additives and neo-Jacobin ideas added in for good measure.
Yeah.
But ostensibly, these movements were secular in character. However, sociologically, they behaved just like religions, and this is because they were derivative, again, of an older occult religion. In fact, these secular movements find their origins with occult secret societies, which wished to see their eschatological vision imposed upon the rest of humanity. In particular, there was Freemasonry, which acted as the retainer of the ancient mystery religion that originated in Egypt and Babylon. And this religion was pantheism. Now, pantheism holds that God is an impersonal force, and this force was an immanent energy that channeled itself through all things, through rocks, trees, clouds, animals, and man, and the physical cosmos itself. And this doctrine of immanentism acted as the perfect conceptual segue for atheistic materialism, because it relocated God within the ontological plane of the physical universe, and it provided the metaphysical foundation for the primacy of matter. Now, materialism was a core metaphysical precept of occult Freemasonry, and its patron deity, the great architect of the cosmos, was an impersonal force as well, and it was immanent to the physical universe. Now, automatically one identifies a religious continuum here. The Masonic architect was merely another incarnation of the pantheistic God force of the ancient mystery religions, and this continuity of thought was a direct corollary of operative Freemasonry's co-option by Italian humanists in the 1500s, and the operative Masonry of the Renaissance, which was being gradually co-opted by Italian humanists, would eventually become the speculative Freemasonry of the Enlightenment, and Freemasonry would factor into heavily into the Enlightenment, and also heavily into the French Revolution, which was, of course, a bloodbath that stemmed from the primacy of the Enlightenment. But at the core of Freemasonry's humanist doctrine was the anthropocentric dictum of Protagoras, and that is that man is the measure of all things. Now, encapsulated within this dictum is a theme common to ancient mystery religions, and that is the deification of man. After all, a being that can act as the arbiter of its own moral precepts would qualify as God. Now, the ancient mystery religions circulated an inner doctrine of apotheosis, and this inner doctrine was only really discerned by the most esoteric of the adherents of the mystery religions. Lesser, more carnally inclined members seldom were ever exposed to it or seldom could ever discern it. This doctrine, though, was the logical outgrowth of pantheistic thought. If God were, after all, in all things, then all things were God, including man himself. And man was, in fact, according to this doctrine, a God in the process of becoming. This is where the belief in evolution actually began. It did not begin with Charles Darwin. It began with the ancient mystery religions of antiquity. According to the mystery religions, man was undergoing a process of gradual development, an incremental march toward becoming God. And throughout the late 19th century, historians noted an explosion in belief systems that concerned themselves with emergent deities. There was Auguste Comte's Humanite. There was George Friedrich Hegel's Weltgeist. There was Nietzsche's Übermensch, and several other doctrines of emergent deities. But all Charles Darwin did was reiterate this religion of emergent deities, of apotheosis, within the metaphysical garb of naturalism. So suddenly theocratic power structures, which of course required myths, became more so secular power structures, but with newly refined, better manufactured secular myths. And Darwinism acted as the edifying myth for the new scientific theocracy. But rising concurrently with the doctrine of emergent deities was what historian James H. Billington called the Promethean faith. And this faith was a myth adhered to by the early romantics, such as Marx and the Russians of Lenin's time. And the myth of Prometheus basically mirrors the paradigmatic character of the fall of Lucifer. Just as Lucifer was the supposed light bearer, Prometheus was a light bearer because he stole fire from the gods. Just as Lucifer rebelled against Jehovah, Prometheus rebelled against the gods. And just as Lucifer inspired man's conceit that he would become a god, Prometheus bequeathed the symbolic fire of knowledge to man so that his own cognitive powers could act as the chief facilitators of his salvation. So basically, Prometheus was the paganized version of Lucifer. But remember, the metaphysical entities of the traditional Abrahamic faiths are confined to the ontological plane of the physical universe. Thus, the same holds true for Lucifer. No longer in the Luciferian's eyes is Lucifer a literal metaphysical entity. Now he's a symbol for the cognitive powers of man and humanity's potential to achieve apotheosis. And interestingly enough, many of the Promethean revolutionaries entertained a preoccupation with the occult. At the same time, they advocated a stridently secular social order. Now, how does one explain this paradox? How does one go about explaining this this strange contradiction? Well, William Sims Bainbridge, a sociologist, makes clear in his paper, Religions for a Galactic Civilization, that secularization does not represent the complete obliteration of religion. Instead, it represents the opening stage of an occult counterculture movement. Secularization is commonly associated with atheism, the rejection of God, yet as Bainbridge makes clear, secularization is not the obliteration of religion. It is instead the clearing of the spiritual marketplace and the installation of a new religious authority. It comes as little surprise that secularization would facilitate such a shift in religious thinking, because atheism is a philosophical impossibility premised upon the notion that man has the omniscience and omnipotence necessary to conclusively reject God's existence. Of course, if one possesses omniscience and omnipotence, then one becomes a god. So here you have atheism acting as a philosophical